Maybe I should just say at the beginning, don't expect too much. I don't have the answers to all of these questions. One thing by way of introduction that I noticed yesterday, I sort of took down my notes for my talk, and then I thought I would quickly Google top tips for public speaking, and I came across Tim's site, and I thought, okay, this is a good thing. I should just refresh my memory and all the things you should do and shouldn't do. And it was a very good site because it gave me the 10 things I should do, and I read through those, and I thought, I think I can do those. And then I got through the 10 things that I should never do. And number 7 was never give the last address on an all-day event. Apparently you were all weary and hoping I finish early. But I don't know about the finishing early part, but I'll do my best to keep you engaged since that's also part of the talk today. The idea we sort of gave to this was bridging the gap. And I'm not going to suggest right from the very beginning that I've got this great insight that's going to transform the whole concept. But I think by way of introduction, we did, in my previous job, have an experience that initiated me to this problem in a way that I think few other organisations could have had. I worked for a private language school in Germany. That was my student job when I went there. I've been there the last 12 years. And I went there to study and do all the rest of it. But I started working at this school. And the school was very good. We predominantly taught in private businesses, so we'd get contracted out, we'd go into these companies and we'd teach the people. And they were motivated learners. You know, Germans, they're into education. And of course, they're realising next month they're off to the United States to sell whatever they're going to have to sell, so they had an interest in learning this stuff. But what my company figured out was the people who are paying for this are not the people we're teaching, that's the company that's paying for it. So all these people have a disposable income and they're potential customers. So in 2001, they basically went into their schools, into these companies, and started saying, we're going to offer something that didn't actually exist in Germany at that time. Sounds a little unbelievable, but there were no English language camps in Germany for kids. And so they thought, let's start doing this. And they got a small team of us together, and they basically said, can you guys come up with a concept? And so we were very busy, very excited, coming up with all these good things that we thought would make for a great English camp. We were kind of, that was more than 10 years ago, so I was younger and I was very excited about this. It's also nice to get out of the boardroom a little bit. It's very serious and sterile in there. So we went off, and on the very first day, we realised we had a huge problem. We'd planned 6 English camps, one for each of the main schools around Germany, and luckily their holiday times are different, so we could basically take the same team and just go around Germany. We get into the camp and we realised we had this big problem insofar as we talked about a triangle of expectation that was really something we couldn't deal very well with and we hadn't planned for. One element of that triangle was known to us, it was our company. Their only standard for success was, since we're going to grow this is going to be a big new thing for us, we want to see in that feedback at the end, did they have a good time? Yes, but more importantly, would you come back to a Berlitz camp? Tick yes. That's what they wanted. We knew this. We were working for these people before. That was always their standard for success. The problem was the other 2 parts of our triangle. Parents on the first day, I mean, I should say, I do, and I know we've got some Germans in the audience, I do love Germans to death, and I didn't live there because I had to, I lived there because I wanted to. But they take education very seriously, and it's a very good sort of state system insofar as education is free. You might say, okay, it's free to some extent here too, but Germany takes it to another level. I'm a foreign student, and I never paid for a cent of my university education. It's all free there. You can just go and have an education. So it's a great system. It also means, though, people aren't used to paying for their education. And if they're going to pay, and Berlitz is an expensive language company, it costs hundreds of euros to go there. For a 2-week camp back then, I think, this is 12 years ago, it was about just shy of €1,000. Actually, it was marks when I first started. They were selling them in marks. But these days, it's about €1,000. And so people are paying this money. And they would talk to us on the first day and say, well, our standard for success is our kids are going to get better grades, right? And of course, I have to say, sure they are. That's why they're here. I'm an English teacher. You can have that expectation. That's a reasonable expectation. Problem was then the third part, and this is where everything spun out of control, is we met the kids. We hadn't really thought much about this. We thought, well, we're teaching people. They'll sit in front of us. They'll be like our students. What do we know of students? It's their parents. Serious people learning serious things. These kids come. Who are the most likely people to come, if you think about it? It's the people who are going to pay for the money because their kids aren't doing well in school. They aren't engaged. They don't want to be there. They're getting bad grades. And when they're told by their parents, you'll be coming in your holidays to English camp, you've got 6 weeks, 2 of them are in English camp. That sounds like remedial school. And they turn up and their hats are on the side and they're like this and they're looking at us and they're having the conversation with the parents, oh, but I don't want to be here. But it's crap. And then, of course, the parents leave and we're left with the students. Hi, welcome to English camp. And they're all deciding amongst each other, this is crap, this is so stupid, yeah. And then they've formed this group. And before we've even started with our program to engage them and get them going, we've got to overcome what we didn't anticipate, which was they hate us and they think the program is stupid and now they're stuck here. It's like a little bit like that. And we're realizing the parents are going to expect one thing, our bosses are going to expect one thing, these kids are going to go home and say it's crap because they've been telling their parents for the last couple of weeks, I don't need to do this. And we're sitting there thinking, I remember saying to my boss, this is a student job. She said, why is it a student job? I said, because only a student would be here. And it was really a tough environment. But in those first few days, we had, I would say, probably now I'd call them crisis meetings, trying to reconcile not just how we're going to teach this program, but how we're just going to contain the sort of pandemonium we had. Getting them into English class, this is crap, this is my holidays, this is my free time, I don't have to do anything. And I realised, wow, we've got such a huge problem here. Before we even start with what we planned, we've got a whole other sort of dimension we've got to get through. At that point I want to stop, and it's a far too long a story to tell, 2001, that first summer, through to now. But if I do tell you the end of the story, it finishes like this. That first summer, I think we had, I don't know exactly, 150 to 200 kids throughout Germany going to these Berlitz camps. Last year, in Berlitz camps throughout all of Germany, they had just shy of 10,000 kids going through. Exactly, you don't have to be from the business department to figure out that's really quite off the scale in terms of a success model. And that's how it started. That's really how it started. And I think that part of the success, and I realise we're looking at this from a university context, I can't say that everything we applied there is going to work here. But I think what we figured out in that initial camp, when we were sitting there having our crisis meetings, was if we have to try and square this triangle or square the circle or whatever you want to call, if we want to try and get to some level of success, we've got to figure out a way of doing it. And the only thing we could really figure out was all these triangles of expectation, that the way we're going to figure this out is if we can get those students to be on board with our program. And we didn't really have any great insights into that, but what we did end up doing, which was not something we would tell our company, was we basically pushed the English off the radar. We said to them, okay, all right, stop. We'll stop doing this English class stuff the way it's been sold to your parents and everything, because we recognise you guys just hate it, hate us, hate the whole thing. You want to have a holiday, let's just have a holiday, because frankly that's what we wanted to have too, is good times. So we pushed it off. After a few days, going canoeing, going on bushwalks, and they've forgotten that we're supposed to be the people enforcing English and all the rest of it. Of course, what happens, we get to know them really well. They're actually nice kids. We're having good times. You can't not have a good time when you're out on a beautiful lake on a beautiful day, canoeing along and doing all the things you do. And then they started to like us. And of course, the whole time we were speaking English, so we were selling it to ourselves as, well, if they just like us and we talk English, well, it's something at least, you know? Then we started to realise, survive the next 2 weeks, you got it in one. That's actually what we were thinking. But we started to realise that they actually like us. And then we said, guys, listen, I don't want to be too hard on you. I know we've been through this already, but frankly, if we just did something on irregular verbs, your simple past would be so much better. If you'll forgive me, could we please do these things? They were fine with it. Why were they fine with it? Because I wasn't the guy from the English company trying to sell. I was Dave. And, you know, I'm like to think I'm a half-decent person. I can get along with people. That's a nice skill. And so once they knew us, absolutely. Then they would sit there, engaged. Oh, actually, the classes aren't too bad. They're actually kind of cool. And we were finding our games, we're doing our things. Suddenly they're interested, they're engaged, they're doing it. And at the end of the week, back then we didn't do it anymore, but we used to have little tests. We didn't call them tests, but we were doing these things. And they're actually doing quite well. I mean, I don't know where those kids all ended up, but I do know the next year we got large numbers of them coming back and, of course, expanding the program. That's not the only part to it. I think there was a whole big learning curve we went through about how that program went from such a small one to such a large one. But it is the case that at the end, Berlitz was still the most expensive language camp program in all of Germany. Lots of other companies had since bought on their ideas. I think we were still 80% of the market share and the most expensive. And I think it had a lot to do with what we figured out in that first week. And that small team, actually, I'm the first one to leave from that initial sort of 4 or 5 people. What we figured out was, and it became a huge thing for our recruitment, it became a huge thing for our new program, and we adapted it and adapted it and adapted it. But it always came back to the same thing. We have to use the best resource we've got. And that, to make all this stuff successful, is going to be personality. It's going to be about forging bonds with these guys. And I've been talking probably a little bit too much to my colleagues by virtue of the fact that I'm standing here, but about this idea that I find so difficult actually in the university now, that I'm teaching in History 1A with David and Eleanor. I'm really enjoying it. Of course, I've got a passion for history, but I'm noticing how people I lecture to, I have no real connection to. And in all these things, I mean, I've been listening to the speakers all day and I've been thinking, gosh, they're making good points. Gosh, that's good stuff. But in terms of transitioning it, my fallback is always, if only I could know who I'm talking to, if only they knew me as well, if only we could see, in a way, actually it was last speaker, Brigitte, saying, how she has such a passion for the reading. And I thought to myself, that's right. And I find that kind of thing, there's an energy about that. Someone talks to you about their passion, how much they love it, how great it is. You can't help but get infected. Even if you're not really interested yourself, you think, well, this person is, and that's interesting to me. And if I've got an interest for history, that's also great. But how much does that really come across? How do we really engage these students? I don't know if there's an answer, but if there's a principle that applies equally, in my view, to Berlitz World as it does to university, because I think it's a bit of a human phenomenon, is if we can engage with these guys because they can get to know us, then I think our chances of achieving all these things and transcending that gulf and indeed reaching out to these people is that much better. I had one little instance of that just in our History 1A course. We get them to do blogs. We're trying to also learn from English. Seems to be working out well. I've not got the experience to know, but it does seem that they're reading. And I had one guy who came to me and he said to me, I went to him and I said to him, you haven't got your blog in. And he wasn't on my radar for a problematic student in any way. And he said, yeah, I know. And I said to him, well, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. They're supposed to be due on a Monday. I was talking to him on a Thursday. And in our system, we've decided they lose 1 point for each day that they're late. So by the time I'm telling him this on the Thursday, he's going to lose 4 points already. Now, out of 10 points, if he's lost 4, and I would say the average blog is about a 6, that's meaning that you could still do it and might get 2. He wasn't a strong student, so he'd be lucky to get 2, but that's as it was. The next week, he came to me and he said, here's my blog. And I said to him, Matthew, I've explained this to you. Look, you've lost a point every day. He said, no, I know. I don't want you to think I'm lazy, Dave. I want you to think I'm doing it. And I didn't have any more conversation. I just took it and thought, okay, it's now 0, because that was the next week he gave it to me. He's lost all his points. But it mattered so much to me because I thought, that's what I want to see. The kid actually did the work. I don't know if he did because he thought this is something that he needs to know, but it also mattered to me that he cared enough to not think I would think he's lazy. And that is a kind of, I guess, a microcosm of the whole concept. That if we can get these guys thinking it matters, and even if it doesn't matter, I don't want that guy to think I'm lazy or I'm not doing the work, or I don't respect him, or I don't. And I think that's very true of all those kids we had in the English camps. I mean, there's 1,000 examples out of that where we got really, I think in some ways, sort of life-changing experiences from some of those kids. I think camp is a bit like that at those ages anyway. They always make it out to be very big. But they had some amazing experiences, and it was a lot about being positive with them. It was a lot about taking them to places they hadn't been to before, and it was a lot about just reinforcing that they could actually do it. Because if we've got those students who aren't particularly good, and then we take them, we give them 2 weeks, and what was interesting about that 2 weeks that we would have is, I used to say to them, look, you can be the worst English student in the classroom. It doesn't much matter to me, but I want you to give your best, your 100%. And if you're 100% positive with the students, and they know, and there's all this good atmosphere, it's the opposite of a vicious circle, whatever that is. Thank you. See, there you go. Lots of help in the room. And this was definitely what was driving them. And I would find that people who were bad at English class were very often bad not because they weren't intelligent kids, but because the nature of school and the nature of how their heads work is, I'm so afraid if I say the wrong thing, everyone's going to go, and kids would do, duh, oh my God, that's not how it is, it's like this. And so they don't say anything. But if you can establish that environment, okay, it's easier with a smaller class, where everything's positive, where everything goes well, and where they feel kind of safe, not just from each other, but also from the teacher, it's amazing what kind of results we got. And even in only 2-week camps, I could definitely see kids make a big improvement. And as I say, then they'd come back the next year and you wouldn't wonder why. So in a nutshell, that's basically what I wanted to talk on, this bridging the gap idea. And I don't know that I have any real answers, as I said at the beginning, for how that applies in university world, because I understand it's a very different forum, a very different medium, but that I think at least that conversation begins, and I think even if it's not so much I can get to know 123 people in my classroom, maybe that's impossible, but maybe it's just something I thought of yesterday, maybe if they just get to know me, and that might mean a bit more of a sort of a personal style of lecturing, or a personal style, showing a bit more of myself rather than, I'm Dr. David Stahel, welcome to my lecture, and now I want you to open your whatever, but rather, hey, I've got this good little story I want to start my lecture with. This is great. This is something that really happened. And already I think everyone, even if they've got no interest in the topic, is thinking, well, I want to hear the story at least. You know, I want to know what this is. If it's going to be interesting for me, that's good. And if all that stuff we've been saying today about their attention spans and how their brains work and how they're not engaged is true, and I think it is true, then trying to reinvent the wheel in some respects with how we engage with them, I think is probably worth the time. But thank you very much. Okay. Oh, yes. Yep. Mm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So true. Well, I mean, I didn't mention it, but I think that the real transition between the 200 kids and the 10,000 kids was an idea they had about 2004, 2005, where they said, you know what, we shouldn't even bother selling English camps anymore. We should start selling, I think there's now 60 different types of camps that they offer, and none of them say English camp. They say karate camp, horse riding camp, football camp, all these things, but in English. And so, of course, then you see both worlds coming together. The parents aren't really caring about karate, whether the kids are good at karate or not, but the kids care. Parents see it's English. Suddenly both worlds are the same, and we don't have to forge the bond at the very beginning anymore because we've got kids who want to be there. And that creates a dynamic. The problem was when we had the dynamic of most kids saying, this sucks. That was the dynamic. They all want to feed off each other. Does it suck? Okay, yeah, it sucks. All right? But if they're all saying, cool, karate, and we got people in to do these things who could speak English, and of course these muscly people, and we stand next to them and say, welcome to English camp. And you go, English camp? This is English camp? So yeah, you got to speak English. And he'd say, oh, I thought it was karate camp. And the kids would all cheers, karate camp. What the hell's this English component? They of course knew, but we had that, you know, off on the right foot type start. And when you've got all these different things, yeah, well, sounds kind of strange, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing just how that concept in their head, if it's a positive one, then everything's positive. And they all, what do they say? Group think? They all group think more than our guys do, I think. And if we got that group think in a positive way, we definitely had our spiral turning upward. And we had engaged kids. And honestly, I used to say, God, I was in my 30s doing these camps, and I used to say, I really like it. Not because any of the program is new for me, I've done it 100 times, but if what I said is true, there's an energy there, I couldn't help but feed off it. I would getting all excited on casino night, trying to win money, you know, because every week I win money, and, you know, some weeks I don't, but I'm positive, and the kids are all getting excited. We got all our money out, and suddenly I'm making thousands of euros. It's only plastic, but it matters to me somehow. And when it matters to me, it matters to them. And then we're comparing our money. And we're going in double or nothing in the last 5 minutes of the night. And it's super exciting, you know. And if we can translate that into English class, which we were starting to do. I mean, I remember having the magic camps, just to pick up your point. And then they had the idea, okay, for English classes, we'll have English class, half standard English class. Then we have to dress up as magicians and go in and teach a magic class. Everyone has to learn 45 minutes of magic. And it's amazing what unbelievable concentration they would have. And it was all the same. And I could whack in, halfway through my magic thing, a little English point on grammar. Total, I've got the answer! No, I've got the answer! No, I've got the answer! And rushing forward, and I'd think to myself, God, this is amazing. All I'm doing, I'm the same guy. I'm just dressed up in a ridiculous costume, saying the same stuff, but suddenly it's all action, you know? Crazy. Anyway.
David, I know you've spoken about the difficulty we have in the class time structure of achieving this sort of personal connection. Not just the lecture, which particularly if you've got a big class, has to be sort of more formal,
Yeah.
but also just 50 minutes of a tutorial. You you said just isn't enough.
Yeah,
So I
yeah, that's true.
Well,
Look, that's just my thing. I think in some ways, I don't know how well prepared I was because of that previous career for this career that I'm just finding. I mean, it was the 8th or 9th week before I felt in my 6 tutorials I had the names of everybody. And if you've had that other principle, that suddenly I would be kicking myself getting the wrong name, but also not really knowing who they are. How do I address their problem with their blog every week when I'm sitting there with my 1 minute? I used to take 1 minute for each student to give them their feedback. But I really valued it because I kind of thought, well, this is my one chance for them to actually think that I matter. And it's funny, I used to say things to them, I'm still saying to them, it's not like it's past anymore, but I would say to them, look, you guys all think that I'm the guy who gives you the grade, so I'm the pass or fail guy. I really don't want that. Yes, I will do that, but understand one thing. There's one standard at this university. It doesn't matter who's sitting in this chair, there's one standard. And I'm actually on your side. I don't see any difference. I want to give the best lectures I can. I want to give the best tutorials I can. I want to make this as interesting as I can, because if it is, you guys do well, fantastic. That looks good for me. It looks good for Eleanor and David if everyone's passing or doing well. And even if you're not doing well, then tell me. Feel you can come to me. But, I don't want this idea that I'm the arbiter of pass-fail. You may fail, and you may fail, because you guys are not doing the right thing. And if only you did, then you might. And frankly, it's not hard. And frankly, if you only understood what I know, which you don't, you can just start to see the But, I think if they feel it's more round table and that I'm on their side, and it still may mean that they fail. And frankly, I'm having to sit with them one-on-one and saying, your blog failed this week, I'm really sorry. But it's because of this and this and this. And remember, we've gone through this. Read the academic culture book. And please remember, we're only interested in the chapter, not necessarily your opinion on the whole thing, okay? Just remember these things. But I really want you to do better, but you've got to do it, okay? And I think that they want to respond. And then when I see that Matthew guy come to me and say, I didn't want you to think I didn't care about what you're trying to say, or that I just didn't care about the subject, then I think, wow, something, without him necessarily knowing it, I didn't have any conversation with him, but I thought, why would he bother to do it when he knew there was no marks? He must have felt that there's something more important than just his mark. And I think if we're at that point, we've crossed the Rubicon. Yeah.
I absolutely support all that, right up until you say, he must have thought because he's dingo.
That is very possible.
All of your other critical statements is tremendous. This is a very interesting place to change the of mum and dad in town. In fact, they're on campuses. And so some of the things that you wish to behave like, and then they do, because it was wished for.
Yeah.
But
No, I think you're right. No, I think you're right. I think that is also a challenge in Germany as well. I mean, just to come back to David's point for the last speaker, I mean, there's a huge pressure. I don't know so much about the Australian context, but there's a huge pressure there because only if you go to a certain type of school called a gymnasium can you go to university. You have to make that decision when you're 12. So there's a huge pressure on kids. And I think now the statistic is, maybe Christina, I heard it was 65% of kids go to gymnasiums. And the difference between how many kids went to gymnasiums 30 years ago is far smaller. And it's because already at the age of 12, you've got kids under enormous pressure because your whole future seems to depend on this. And I would have kids in the camp sometimes, because we get to know them, not just as a student, but as a person, who'd say, oh, but I'm very stressed about my English. I'm very stressed. And I'd say, why? Because I won't get a good job if I don't speak English. And I'd say, that's fair enough to have that concern, but I think that's too much if you're worried about that at 12 years old and you're giving up your summer because you're worried about your future. I said, first thing you should be doing, my friend, is having a nice time here. And you might just find that the English then just flows on from that. And frankly, if it doesn't, okay, I don't want to set myself up against your mum and dad or your teachers or whatever, but there's more important things to worry about at 12 than the rest of my life, That's a good thing. I'm glad you're thinking of it. That's, I don't want to say it's the wrong thing, but honestly,
$50 on black.
Oh, yeah. But I put $50 on black. That's it. There you go. See, there you go. That's kind of the philosophy. Anyway.
Look, David, thank you very much.